Windows NT4 Server was a serious operating system, but many of its best administration tools didn't come in the box. Microsoft hid them away in the resource kit. Tools for managing remote computers, cleaning up profiles, monitoring network shares, hardening security, and even sharing a clipboard across the network. In this video, I'm going to show you 10 tools from the Windows NT4 resource kit that I found especially interesting and helpful. Now, you probably wouldn't even think of having to find these things today, but back in the times of NT4, the resource kit was a really beneficial set of tools to have. Delprof was a tool for deleting Windows profiles. On NT, profiles were stored on the C drive as a rule, and they often took up a lot of space, particularly when they started filling up with temporary files and internet files. Profile size became a real issue when you were running a terminal server and you had maybe tens, 20s, hundreds of users logged onto a server. Likewise, if you had a workstation that was in a factory and was used over 3 shifts, you would rapidly grow profiles on the machine. And if people had logged on once and then never logged in again, it was very helpful to be able to work out which people's profiles hadn't been used for a number of days. Delprof ran from the command line, and it gave you multiple options to be able to control the profiles that were installed on a workstation. I run the help switch with the question mark, and there's several options there. The remote computer that you can connect to and the number of days of inactivity are the most interesting switches that are available. To show how this works, we'll do a delete on my profile here. It's not been used since the 18th of May this year. I'll split the screen here. On the left, I'll run the Delprof command, while on the right, you can see workstation 2, where the Kyle profile will be deleted. The Delprof tool was especially useful on terminal servers and shared workstations used by rotating shifts, where dozens or even hundreds of old profiles could otherwise build up and consume all the disk space. One of the biggest limitations for an NT administrator was screen space. Back in the 90s, I always had a small monitor, 14 inches usually on the server, which meant working was pretty difficult. This tool was created, MultiDesk for NT, which enabled you to have virtual desktops, which in reality meant you could click a button and switch from one set of open windows to a fresh desktop with another set of open windows, which, although not allowing you multiple monitors, was pretty handy if you wanted to keep one page with a configuration on it and one page where you were implementing it, for example, and then a third page with some monitoring on it. You can see here on the screen that I've switched to 2 desktops and I go back and forwards between Internet Explorer and the command prompt. This wasn't virtual desktops in the true sense, but it did give an administrator more space to work on a small monitor. The limitation was that these weren't separate Windows sessions. They were simply different desktops inside the same NT logon. An ordinary application crashing would normally affect only that application, but logging off, restarting Windows, or suffering a system crash would close all 3 desktops together. This is QuickRes, which places a small icon in the system tray at the bottom right of the desktop. Clicking that icon opens a menu of the available resolutions and color depths, so you can switch display modes without having to go back through the full display properties window. You could sort the available modes by resolution or color depth, filter out untested settings, and decide exactly how the refresh rates were presented. Instead of digging through NT standard display properties each time, this put the available screen modes into a much quicker menu, making it far easier to jump between resolutions. The next tool is ShutGUI, which let an administrator shut down or restart either the local machine or another Windows NT computer across the network. You could also display a warning message and set a countdown, giving anyone using the machine a little time to save their work before it restarted. Although shutdown could already be controlled from the command line, ShutGUI gave administrators a much simpler graphical tool. It could even be handed to a trusted user, for example, so they could shut down a computer elsewhere in the office without needing to understand the command itself. This one's WinDiff. It was quite handy for looking at the differences between 2 sets of folders or 2 sets of files. Here I'm going to show you a comparison of 2 directories, the resource kit and server resource kit, and it will show me which files are identical and which ones are different between the 2. That was handy if you'd done a manual copy or somebody had said they copied files from one location to another to see whether there were any differences between the 2 locations. Yes, you could use things like robocopy to do that in advance, but many times people didn't, and this was a handy tool to do a quick comparison if a customer got stuck. WinDiff could also compare the contents of two individual text files, highlighting lines that had been added, removed or changed. That made it useful for checking versions of scripts, configuration files and source code. Ultimately, WinDiff lacks modern features such as syntax highlighting, built-in merge tools and reliable Unicode comparison. As those limitations became more noticeable, administrators and developers increasingly moved to newer, more capable alternatives. NetWatch let administrators see shared folders on an NT server and which users were connected. I connect to a share from a workstation, then go back to NetWatch and refresh the display. The workstation and user account show up under that share. This makes it clear who was accessing the server. NetWatch expanded on information available through commands such as netSession, presenting it as a much clearer graphical tree. Rather than just listing active sessions, it showed the server's individual shares and which users or workstations were connected to each one. In the netSession output, the client is identified as Windows NT 1381, the build number used by the original release of Windows NT 4, so the server could also report which version of NT the connecting workstations were running. The real purpose of Windows NT was to provide an enterprise corporate operating system for business. Windows 3.1 and 95 had focused on individual and consumer users. Windows NT introduced authenticated accounts, protected memory, access permissions, and detailed auditing from the beginning. This security setup was key to Microsoft's claim that NT could stand alongside established Unix systems and other major network operating systems. The C2 Configuration Manager made these security principles practical for administrators, and Microsoft even added a special splash screen to highlight how important security was for NT. C2 Security was a US government standard focused on controlled access, individual user accountability, and detailed auditing of activity. In this setting, the boot ini timeout is set to 0. This means that when the machine starts, it can only load Windows NT as the operating system, and the user cannot make any further changes to it. This was one of the many security settings that could be put in place, although you were able as an administrator to later change these through Control Panel. Items that are configured correctly are shown with a closed red padlock. For example, the guest account is already disabled. The logon message setting is more confusing. It appears with an open padlock, suggesting a failure, but when you inspect it, the program admits that a warning message is not actually required for C2 compliance, so it arguably should not have been flagged at all. The yellow question marks identify checks that C2 Configuration Manager couldn't verify automatically, so the administrator had to confirm them manually. These included setting a power on password in the BIOS, securing the system partition on certain RISC machines, replacing the server version of User Manager for domains with the standard User Manager icon, and reviewing users' rights against the Microsoft C2 Security Administrators Guide. It shows that it wasn't a one-click route to C2 compliance. The utility could automate some settings, but the final configuration really depended on the hardware, the version of NT, and the administrator following all the accompanying documentation. The hardware compatibility list was Microsoft's official reference for the processors, complete systems and peripherals that were all tested to work with Windows NT 4. Here I'm looking through the processor selection and selecting the x86 Uni processor. But for anyone interested in today's business IT retro collections, this whole list is almost a Bible, a period-correct catalogue of the machine's network cards, storage controllers, and all the other hardware that NT administrators were actually expected to purchase and use. For large enterprises, hardware compatibility was actually essential. When buying hundreds of thousands of PCs, servers and expansion cards, a single unsupported controller or network adapter could cause failures throughout the rollout. The hardware compatibility list gave procurement teams and system architects a reliable baseline so they could standardize on equipment that Microsoft had certified to work with Windows NT and avoid expensive problems later. Moving over to printers, the list includes one of my favourites of all time, the HP LaserJet 4. This really was a legendary office laser printer, solidly built, dependable, easy to maintain and capable of producing page after page for years. Plenty of businesses kept them running long after newer models arrived, and some, they're still working today. This is NetClip, an enhanced clipboard viewer for Windows NT. When I open it, you can see the clipboard already contains part of an unattended installation text file. So NetClip gives me a way to inspect exactly what's been copied before I paste it somewhere else. And yes, Windows NT already included Clipbook Viewer, so viewing the local clipboard wasn't really new. NetClip's real advantage was that it could connect directly to the live clipboard on another NT computer, making it an early form of remote clipboard sharing. Here I've copied a block of text on the remote workstation and then used NetClip on the server to connect directly to that machine's live clipboard. The text immediately appears on the server's clipboard viewer, showing how an administrator could move commands, configuration details, or other information between NT computers without first saving it to a file or copying it through a shared folder. The About box credits Microsoft engineer Charlie Kindle, who spent 21 years at the company and was closely involved in developing ActiveX and DCOM. NetClip was therefore not just a useful clipboard utility, it was also a practical demonstration of DCOM, allowing software components on separate computers to communicate across a network. In the late 1990s, books and help files were the main way system administrators learned about their tools. There were no online walkthroughs. You had to rely on these resources to figure out how Windows NT worked and how to fix problems as they came up. For many administrators, including myself, the resource kit was not just an extra set of tools, it was the main reference you kept next to the server. You would use it for help files, examples and test commands in the lab. Over time, this process helped you build the knowledge you needed to keep a network running. It took longer than watching a tutorial today, but it led to a much better understanding of the operating system.